All right, I'm going to call the Town of Southborough Capital Planning Committee - School Research Subcommittee to order for Monday, January 10th, 2022. It is currently 10:39 a.m. Before we go and approve meeting minutes from prior meetings, Katura, do you mind doing the meeting minutes for this one?
Sure.
Okay. I had circulated minutes for December 21st, which was the full committee, and December 22nd, which was when I happened to be at advisory, but because two of us make a quorum, Kathy and I posted just to be safe. There was no topics discussed there, and the minutes reflect that. I didn't feel the need to include whatever else advisory talked about because it was unrelated to the committee. So I don't know if anyone had any questions or comments on 21 or 22 of December.
No. Nope.
Okay. And Kathy, you do not have Fridays from when you and I just met quickly.
No, sorry.
Okay, no, that's totally fine. We have plenty of time. All right, so I will move that we accept the meeting minutes for December 21, 2021 and December 22, 2021 as written. There a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call. Cook,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. All right, so that's unanimous. Next item on the agenda is superintendent's update, MSBA statement of interest, Neary School. Greg, anything new since we last discussed?
No new news.
Okay.
And Jason, I'll just add that you are correct on the Hopkinton's statement of interest. They're ahead of the process from where I originally thought.
What does that mean?
They have completed the 270-day process and have been invited into the next phase. So they're actually substantially ahead for one of their building projects in terms of MSBA partnership.
Okay, so that explains they didn't jump the queue or they didn't get special treatment as far as the normal calendar.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the new statement of interest still opens at the end of this month, right? So is that correct? They haven't pushed that out at all?
The accelerated repair window opens this month, Keith.
Correct.
And the core building programs window has not been, I don't think it has been announced at this point in time for next year.
It might have, Greg. Let me, I'll double check that right now.
How long does the accelerated repair window stay open?
About 2 months, Kathy. And the core program will also open on the 28th of January and go through the end of April. So that's open for 3 months.
Jason, do you want to update everyone as far as what we know today about town meeting?
Sure. I don't know what communications have come out from the town at this point, but it's going to be no earlier than the end of April, which leave all the reasons why it was pushed off to the side for a second, I think is a critical month to have specific to this committee's work. Not that we're going to necessarily be working through them, we'll hopefully be done, but that it would allow the MSBA decision to, right, of whether to accept or not really be finalized. Because I think March 3rd is the magical day at the latest, Greg, right? So it will also give us the ability to digest it and let the school committee and the town decide, which path we're going to take depending upon which path we may or may not be given. So I think April 30th is the earliest possible date for town meeting at this point.
Good to know. That's actually helpful for us, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
Time to bring it up.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So,
And so Jason, what's the, are there other deadlines that moved for that too? For like when items need to be submitted or no?
I would have, well, I didn't listen to that part of the meeting, to be honest with you, but what I heard is, they're gonna try to figure out what the exact date is and come up with a new calendar. I can't imagine that you would, if this is now hypothetical, Jason speaking, I can't imagine you would post a warrant with detailed descriptions about exact dollar amounts that you would be looking for until you really need to. Because there was a lot of discussion around location of the town meeting. So obviously the Neary playing fields are definitely in play, but there's still discussion of would it be safe to do indoor at that point in time? And then based on what happened last year, at the special town meeting in November, we have the ability, once the state ratifies the town meeting, to actually host it at Algonquin if the facility were available. So we don't have to have it in the physical confines of Southborough. So there's a lot of stuff just logistically on the table that I would think would push a lot of the wording out.
Okay.
So Couture also, I think, related, remember, there is a placeholder already on the warrant for
True.
bring it for this, details to be added, but it's there. And even though the warrant's technically closed, it doesn't mean it can't be reopened if there is a compelling reason to do so. So there's a placeholder already there for the design work cost, if need be.
Okay, true. That's a good reminder.
So I think it's really gonna be about a dollar amount. If it were to go forward, is what's the right dollar amount to put in there?
Yeah.
Okay. Item 4 is update on the town space needs study. I have a little more of a substantive update than the one I gave last time. The Town Capital Planning Committee is tentatively planning on a public meeting on Thursday, January 20th at 7:30 p.m. to get a readout from our hired designer on how a school building, in particular Woodward, could be used to accommodate town needs. So that has come a long way since we met, which is crazy to think, given that we really just had the holidays in between our two meetings. But a lot of the barriers that appeared to exist have now pretty much been resolved, and resolved very favorably. So there's, I'm trying to figure out the right way to communicate, because I imagine there will be multiple boards and committees that will want to jointly post for that meeting. But obviously it's a proof of concept is how I would frame that meeting, not like the end all be all of what a plan would be. I mean, it's phase 0 is how I tend to think of these things, is it's proving that something could work and how it could work. But obviously how you would deal with flow in a building and anything like that would be way down the road, once and only if the school committee were to actually go down that road of saying, we're going to decommission this building because now this has happened with Neary, so we will be able to have left hand talk to right hand, which I think is now bringing together a broader plan. But there was significant progress made, because I was not as optimistic when we spoke last time, if you all remember.
So Jason, is the focus specifically on the Woodward building, or is that not what you're saying?
Yeah, there would be a focus on how it could work at Woodward and what it would look like at a very high level. But it also will show what they looked at using existing infrastructure that we have in town and how that would have worked. So let's just say Woodward wasn't on the table. Dealing with the cards they were dealt initially before Woodward even came into the conversation, how the space needs that these town departments have articulated could or should be accomplished within existing infrastructure. The punchline, this is going to be pretty obvious to everyone, is our existing town infrastructure can't handle what the town needs are, absent a new facility or a building coming into the town's inventory that we don't currently have. So it's going to
So
show some
Jason,
of the
is this,
scenarios.
I'm sorry, so this meeting will be posted under the capital planning committee?
Yes.
Okay, and who's,
Yeah.
can you remind me who the agency is that did the analysis?
Drummy, Roseanne, and Anderson. That's who the town hired through a public RFQ process last summer.
Okay, and they'll be doing the presentation?
They will be.
Okay,
And this will be the first time that capital planning will have seen it as well. So it'll really be a case of first impression. So I got to figure out the cadence, to be honest with you, of there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be very interested in the topic, but obviously focusing the conversation to possibilities as opposed to absolutes.
okay,
So I will be in contact probably no later than tomorrow with Roger, just in case he chooses to post in case a quorum of school committee is there. Same.
okay, so
Kathy, I think I've
that's
already-
next Thursday. That's next
It is.
Thursday, that's, okay.
It is, yeah, it's, but it was important, I think, to have that question answered based on the conversation we were all part of with MSBA. So it'll be nice, timely, if MSBA does come back with that question again. Any questions, comments on that? Okay. Kathy, I'm gonna turn it to you. See where you're at on the MSBA cost analysis. I don't know if you need any screen share, or if you just want to talk through concepts, but really floor is yours.
Well, I'm going to disappoint you. So I'm not ready to do a whole lot with MSBA today because I have been, I need to touch base with a gentleman named John Lemieux, who I think you guys have heard about. He has been hired to basically help answer the question as to pros and cons of MSBA. And he and I have not been able to compare notes for a pretty good reason, COVID. So I'm expecting to hear from him today. I haven't so far. I was hoping I'd hear from him early this morning, but I didn't. So I'm waiting for him to tell me he can talk to me. I got an email from him Friday saying 3 out of 4 members of family hit COVID. So we have not talked, and I am hesitant to say a lot about it till I talk with him. This is his business. He knows it much better than I do. And I don't want to say something that he disagrees with. So broad picture, I've done everything I could do as far as what I think are pros and cons of MSBA. And I just want to sit down with him and we're going to write a memo that basically reflects both persons' viewpoint toward this, and hopefully we end up with on the same page as far as what those pros and cons are. So I intend to get this done ASAP. I will email it to the committee. Obviously, we can't talk about it on email, but I can at least get it out so everybody can read it, and then maybe do a quick meeting to talk about it, just to do this one thing, Jason.
Yeah, because then if you send your summary, I can build it into the report prior to the meeting, so we can approve both. At that, obviously, if there's questions, we're gonna have to go back and figure out a way to do that back and forth in public session. But off to the side, that will probably help to bring the report fully into focus.
But I wanted Greg and Keith to read it too, given their backgrounds, to make sure there's nothing that the two of us have missed that they know about too. So the report that's going to be put on the email will be the report that John and I have agreed on. And then I want Keith and Greg to have a chance to weigh in case we've missed something that they know from the seats that they occupy.
So do you want, let's just say, assuming you talked to John today, when do you think would be feasible that, because I know you're going through budget season here too.
It's okay. I mean, I'm not in crazy shape. So I think if I talk to him today, I would think by Thursday, I would have it on the email once we've gone back and forth and looked at it together and made sure it's what we think. So I think no later than Thursday, it will be on everyone's email.
Okay. And then next Monday is a public holiday. So I'm just thinking ahead, whether we want to pencil a meeting, we can always cancel it. But whether we should pencil a meeting, I mean, as thorough as I imagine it's going to be, I imagine there's going to be questions from someone here of, what it all means. And obviously we need to reach a consensus too, because I think it would inform our recommendations, right, to the school committee. So do we want to look at calendars now or just a little later once we get through the rest of the agenda of when we can maybe regroup next week on that specific point?
Katura, what does your calendar look like?
I'm pretty flexible. I mean, other than the weekend, the long weekend, but I'm pretty flexible. Do we want to get through the agenda, as Jason said, and just see what else? Because are we also talking about a special school committee meeting schedule? Do we want to sort of see how many things we're trying to schedule and then look at the calendar then?
I think that makes sense.
I mean, I'm happy to schedule something now. I'm pretty flexible other than Wednesdays. So.
Okay. So let's hold that thought for a second. Before we leave the MSBA cost analysis, Kathy, what are your thoughts on me trying to work with Brian Ballantyne, or if you have time to do it, that would work too, to take a range of numbers? I don't know what the range is yet, but like getting something set up, like if we bonded X amount in X year versus X amount in this year, how this plays out. Because I don't even know because obviously we know the number one question people are going to ask, regardless of what number we land on, whether it's renovation, new, etc., is how does this impact my tax bill? And obviously interest is a key component here too, of the quicker you bond, and you and I have talked about this before, Kathy, right? The quicker you bond, the better it probably is, but there's no certainties in this world and all of that. So I don't know if you think that's too soon, or whether you want to see where you come out, or whether we want to get
After you and I had our working session on Friday, I decided to put that in the report. So I've got a section reserved for that. So I would like to talk to Brian myself.
Okay.
But what we need to decide today is what range of numbers to use. So that's one thing we do need to walk away with today, so that I've got something to work with. It can be broad, right? But it's got to be something, 60 to 80, 50 to 90, something.
I would hesitate to throw out any number without seeing what you and John have come up with. The only number I know for sure is that public bidding is in and around 600 a square foot, as I mentioned in the last meeting. That's the current marketplace. That's not the marketplace we're going to be bidding in. So
and the soft costs add another 150, so you're talking 750.
Right.
So that's fine. He knows the stuff. That's better, better than all of us as far as cost goes. So I will work with him on an estimate that reflects the reimbursement and without the reimbursement, and see what we come up with.
Yeah, and then we have a good handle on what repurposing existing facilities would be on the town side as well.
And we're going to hear
Is
that.
that part of the presentation? I'm sorry. Jason, is that part of the analysis? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the single digit millions.
Single digit names. Okay.
And that's with enhancements based on the last draft I saw. So enhancing the existing space. So what I'm also having the town side do is cost out if we were to build just a community center to deal with the community center needs and build a new facility, what that would look like, what that square footage is, leaving all the, I'll call it town and school administration needs off to the side. just if you were to build a recreational senior center sort of thing, what is that number? Because I think that's a variable in all of this too. Again, using that 750 a square foot that Kathy just referenced once you add in the soft costs.
Okay.
But Kathy, I would assume that once you and John connect, you'll have some pretty good judgment on what to use for a range.
I think so.
And I would just say probably go in some increments of 5-ish million. Like if you come up with a number, I would go lower because we can design potentially for a lower number, or you could design for every what if scenario that the community could have. So I don't know, let's just say you came up with $5 of an estimate. I would go as low as like 0 or as high as like 10 or 15. I don't know. That's just my thinking.
Okay. More to come.
Okay. So I have all the components now together for the report. I had some questions for the committee. This is the next agenda topic of how we thought we wanted to do this. So I started to draft slides, and then every time I kept going back to Greg's report, and I actually went back to the 13 report. So when I refer to Greg's report, I'm referring to the administration space needs report that we accepted at the last meeting. I kind of like the written write-up of like, here's a very detailed synopsis of what we did. There's some appendixes, etc. Because I think slides sometimes, they're geared towards high-level commentary, but if left too broad, someone could infer something that maybe isn't precise, versus a report function is really very precise. So I guess where I was starting to pivot and would like guidance from both of you is I was going to have a written document that could be submitted to the school committee in advance of the special meeting or regular meeting, whenever we're going to get slotted in, and then really have only 1 to 2 slides to summarize that discussion. So not put all the graphs back up or everything like that, because I also became very cognizant that the school committee has sat through a lot of the detailed discussions around enrollment studies in particular, that I don't think any of that is going to be news anymore. It's really about how do you execute on what we've heard and what are our paths. So I was thinking of the report would really summarize what the committee did and what conclusions we reached, and have the slides basically chart the path forward. But I just, before I spent any more time on it, I just needed to pause and get feedback from all of you. So I don't know, Katura, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I like that idea in theory. My only thought is that I'm assuming we're going to have a certain level of public interest in this, and I don't know how many of the public are going to read a report, even if it's available to the public. I mean, they may, but we may want to just have a little bit of something that's sort of up on the screen and easy to digest during the meeting that summarizes maybe what we've done, even if it doesn't contain every single detail and we don't spend a lot of time presenting that. But I think that for the people who tune in, it might be helpful to see a summary. And I'm happy to help with this too, Jason, if you want. I mean, let me know if I can be helpful in putting it together. But
I would love any help. We're just incredibly hampered by our quorum.
Yeah, I know. Oh, that's true.
And I'm not gonna sidestep obviously the rules. So
yeah, you're right.
Let me, I mean, Kathy and I talked through points for 20 minutes the other day. We had to call a meeting. We did all right. I mean, and we could certainly work through it on the fly. Just it would have to be on the screen or in some sort of public domain for the public to consume. But let me think through that offer, Katura, because there may be portions that I would welcome especially what you think the other 4 members are going to want to hear and see.
Okay.
A lot of it, thankfully, is already here, and I've already done like the presentation. It's now the costing figures and like those next steps, which I kind of want to talk through because that will craft some slides. So I guess I'll come back to you on how can you help. Kathy, do you concur with what Katura said in terms of kind of need detailed slides and probably a detailed report?
Well, I didn't think she quite said that. Of course, she knows better what a report that you've got a lot of public interest in should look like. She's sat through many meetings where they've had a lot of people in an audience. I think what I heard was a little bit different, which is we're fine. We shouldn't regurgitate the reports, right? They're done. They've been presented. You can attach them. They're available for people to go back and look. You should start from those reports and build on those reports. This is what was concluded. And then therefore, this is why we concluded what we did, but not go back into those reports, I don't think at all. There's not enough time, you got to spend the time on now. This is what we've recommended. This is why, and this is what we think you should do. So I thought that's what she was saying, but maybe, so Katura, you want to clarify?
Yeah, I'm saying more of a summary, like just a summary of what we're relying on to get to the next steps in the recommendation. I mean, I think that, one thing that I'm really surprised and impressed by is the level of detail that the public can absorb. Especially having gone through all the COVID stuff, when we have really detailed presentations, people really seem to like that. And they walk away with, we have a very educated and involved community. And so they really like to understand, and this is a big thing. So, no, I was more saying just maybe one or two summary slides. And I was hesitating to suggest it because I know that you're doing the presentation. I don't want to create more work, but I do think that for the audience that we have, they probably would like just a little recap or something of how did we get to this point, and now what are we talking about going forward? That's what I was saying.
Recap's a great word. So yes, you recap both studies, right?
Yeah.
And then spend the majority of the time talking about what the recommendation is and why we recommended what we did to get to that point. So I think recap.
And I would also say, like, Greg and Keith are experts on coming up with great presentations for the committee and everybody. I don't know what your take is on this and what you think kind of would go over sort of smoothly and kind of be most helpful for people, but I'd love to hear what you think too.
Well, I think it's important to identify the audience. Is the audience the school committee, or is the audience for people who might not have been paying attention and are tuning in for the first time? So I think that's important to decide. I agree. I think a recap makes sense, and then having a very logical, organized space where people can go and see the video, all the meetings that have been held if they want to do their homework and research. And review all the supporting evidence. And then lastly, I just think whatever we recap, that it's obviously supported in evidence, that people can go back to reports and say, okay, I see where they're using these enrollment figures and so forth. So I'm in agreement. I think a recap with well-organized resources for people to dive in deeper if they choose to.
Yeah, my impression is people haven't really tuned in on this yet, from what I can tell.
So we basically have to all your points. It's assuming that people are just walking into this process and didn't read the letter we sent to the communities, whatever that was 6 months ago, don't regularly follow school committee meetings, clearly don't watch our subcommittee meetings, right? So as exciting as they may be. So no, that's exactly why I brought it. That's actually what I have done. So that I think I'm in a much better spot there than I thought I was. I actually gone more detailed and then was, I'm glad we had this discussion because you're kind of validating paths. The other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of next steps, right? So regardless of what the MSBA says, this committee, I think, has fulfilled its charge. And I think what we need to do is with the conclusions we've reached related to enrollment, related to how you would use Trottier and Finn, right? And why those are kind of off to the side. like where do we recommend the school committee go from here? Because it's very clear that if Neary is going to continue as a school in any form, it needs work sooner rather than later. So what I wanted to do is I actually have a bullet point right now about the school committee forming like what I'll call a formal building committee. That's going to be a requirement if we go into the MSBA stage, but I was wondering if it's not too early to do it now, regardless of whether we go with MSBA or not. Like I don't think the MSBA decision is actually relevant to the formation of a building committee, because it would allow, candidly, some subsection of this group and or new people or completely new people. Obviously, Greg and Keith, I think you're the only definites that would continue on something like that. But, really allowing that expertise to say, this is how we advance it, so that if there are questions in the article actually goes to town meeting in terms of feasibility, that one of the things I look back to public safety on is we had a great study committee. We got it through town meeting. We got $20+ million. And then we sat there for 5 months waiting for a building committee to be formed because it wasn't within the charge of the study committee. And I don't think we have time, regardless of which, even if we're just going to go put a new roof on Neary and be done, and that's all right. Like we know it has to be more than that, but like making critical decisions and working with the administration, I just think is a prudent step. And I think also builds goodwill with the community, knowing that there's a group of residents, right, looking at this, not just staff members as much as Greg and Keith. I respect, obviously, your opinions. It's finding that balance. So I didn't know if Kathy and Katura, you're ready to include that recommendation in the report, but I thought if you are, I have a slide I want to add related to that based on past experiences. But I also am trying not to take leaps of faith that I'm assuming something in my head that I think is appropriate that you two would not, stand behind.
I think that is absolutely a excellent idea. I hadn't even thought of that one, but I think that would be well received by the school committee, because look at who's on the school committee. There's no one on it other than Roger Challen, who's got, a real long history in town as far as how to do things like this. So I think that they would be grateful for kind of a roadmap as to, if assuming you accept our recommendation, this is then the next steps, and put, the timing, put, the town meeting timing, and et cetera, and just say, this is what we'd recommend that you then consider doing if you agree with recommendations in this report. So I think it's a great idea. Katura, what do you think? It's your committee.
Well, I'm trying to think, so where are we heading here? So is there still a chance that the town is going to build its own recreation community center and we're just going to do capital improvements on Neary? Because if that's the case, I don't know that we need a separate building committee, because those things are usually managed by the capital planning subcommittee, and then it's in the budget process and it's all handled that way. I think if we're heading in the direction of we're actually going to have a substantial renovation / building a new school structure, then I think that makes sense. So, I think your perspective, Jason, of not having, that caused a delay, not having the appropriate subcommittee to handle the building is an excellent point. And I think we should put that out there for the school committee to consider and think about, like, if we end up heading in that direction, we probably should form the committee that's going to handle that sooner rather than later. I don't know that it would be appropriate right now to make that, because we haven't crossed that crossroads yet, have we? Or do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Maybe we put it in place just in case. I just don't know everyone's going to have an appetite for like volunteering for committees that aren't necessarily going to exist. I don't know. So
I believe we have kind of crossed it. I think that, the conclusion is going to be that we have concluded that we could close a school. And if we close the school, we believe it should be Woodward, and therefore Neary has to be substantially rehabbed and expanded to accommodate the kids we think are going to be there in the next 10, 15 years. So I think we have kind of crossed that. But the question is, does the school committee agree that that's what they want to do? But if we have crossed that and we think that's where we're going, then I think providing the roadmap to continue would be something that they would find extremely useful, especially given Jason's background in doing what he did with both the study committee and then the subsequent building committee, as far as the public safety building.
So I'll just add my prior experience. So I did serve on the Marathon Elementary Town Building Committee prior to its acceptance in MSBA. Was up and running for many years prior to that. And I think it is the right next step, Katura. It doesn't commit anyone to anything, but what it does is it puts the right people in place with the right expertise to drive the process forward. And it also, from my experience on that committee, I was on there for 2 years before I left. The right person leading and chairing that committee can make a big difference in terms of any direction that it decides to go. So I would recommend it. I don't think it's too early. I think it would actually provide some relief to the school committee around deciding next steps and how to move forward. And ultimately, the committee still has autonomy in terms of making some decisions.
So Greg, I didn't mean to give you short shrift on this. So when I said school committee didn't have the background, I wasn't talking about you.
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, this is a different skill set from what I have. And, we have a lot of skill sets on our committee, but it's impossible for any small committee of 5 to have the knowledge base that's needed to kind of move this type of work forward, in my opinion.
In Katura, even if we don't close Woodward and we keep all the schools open, I don't think Neary's just fixing a roof. Neary's still going to need a lot of money spent over the next few years if it's going to be viable one way or the other. So I think the building committee is probably needs to exist regardless of whether Woodward is closed or not. Jason?
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me just say that I feel convinced by all these comments. So fine. Sounds great.
And I'll just second what you said, Kathy, to answer your prompt. I think it's more than a roof at this point.
That is true.
And not to belabor this, you just don't know the quality of the work that Jason's committees did all the way through. It was truly just a roadmap as to how to do it, but he still learned. And he, I think, will be able to point out some of the things that you don't want to do. So he will be able to share some more stories too, as far as how to do this right.
That is a fair statement. And Katura, before we leave this topic, I think the other important part with my delay comment is it still fascinates me to this day that it took so long when we had like 90+% at town meetings say, yes, go build this building. And everyone from our study committee wanted to continue, and there was no questions about that. Kathy joined us because our advisory rep actually became a public member at that point because he left advisory. But we had a good consensus in a group that wanted to continue to work together. So I think the more you build this kind of cohesion amongst the people that would be needed for this sort of work, sooner the better. And I think hopefully we'll find new volunteers in the community too, right? That none of us have had the opportunity to work with that may be able to add to this. So Greg, because I imagine there'll be questions on this, if you can think about between now and our next meeting of like, I know MSBA has specific requirements of what they need. Like they have to have the superintendent, they have to have a school committee member, they have to have finance, capital type representation. And usually there's an architect, engineer. Just what you saw, right? Use Marathon as your example of in any of your superintendent channels that you talk to of like what's working and what's not. Because I am weary of having a committee that's too large, but at the same point in time, right, that you would want to make sure that the school committee, which I believe is the appointing authority here, right, regardless of where these folks are coming from, would know what they're looking for so that they can cast a wide net for the appropriate expertise and do the appropriate due diligence before anyone gets appointed.
I can do that.
Okay. So my next comment related to report, and then I think I'm done for today related to this until we have Kathy's readout, is I'm very focused on public input, and Katura's comments earlier sort of feed into this of this is going to be the first time that anyone's really hearing about this, right? What do we need to do in advance of any meeting, right? Whether it's a special meeting or a regular meeting, I'll let Greg comment on where he thinks this may slot in a second. What do we need to do to educate the community as this subcommittee that this topic is going to be discussed? And here's the potential ramifications of that discussion, and that it's also just the beginning of a very long phase, but it's an important beginning to raise everyone's awareness to what the town is considering with the schools collaboratively. So, Greg, maybe I'll let you answer the question first on when you think this report would be slotted in, and then I'll go to Katura and Kathy to see what they think in terms of public awareness in advance of that meeting.
Yeah, so my looking ahead to the agenda, so this Wednesday's school committee meeting is the recommended budget. So barring any changes in direction from the committee, I imagine that we'll be in a holding pattern in terms of budget until public hearing. And therefore, I think the February 9th meeting actually is a quiet agenda, knock on wood, at this point in time. And I've had some real preliminary conversations with Roger with having it during that meeting. That way there's not a special meeting and it's on kind of the routine schedule that people are used to in the community. That'd be my recommendation at this point.
Any thoughts on that, Katura or Kathy?
That makes sense to me. Sounds good.
Sounds like good timing to me too.
And I think I'll third that, but also say, Greg, obviously, you didn't know that Omicron was coming. You didn't know everything else you're dealing with. So if the agenda does get filled up with items that the school committee needs to take on related to just continuing the operations of the school, my personal preference, and would welcome Katura and Kathy to weigh in, is that you would cede our time from that session to let the school committee deal with that, but commit to a meeting within about a week of that time period. So prior to the February break for a special meeting on this topic, because I also don't want to shortchange this topic, but also candidly want to make sure our kids continue to stay in school. So I know it's a delicate balance for all of you.
School vacation is the 21st.
Correct.
It is.
Yep.
Not that I'm keeping track, Kathy.
You got MLK coming up first.
So I guess, Katura and Kathy, what are your thoughts on if we are to meet next week to hear Kathy's readout, that we also approve like a short blurb that could go out to publicly advertise this meeting that the school committee is going to have? Greg could include it in his weekly emails. We could send it to town sources, recreation listservs, etc. Do you think that makes sense at this point, or it's maybe over advertising?
Are you talking about advertising the February 9th school
Yes.
committee meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. It sounds better than I don't think we need to do a whole new letter since it's going to be a presentation, so but just to alert people that this will be discussed. I think that, I know there are people who post on Facebook about the school committee meetings and kind of let people know that way what's coming up. So
what we can do next week is determine where all to go, but I don't think we've got to run the risk of over advertising with people's attentions being so fragmented these days. So I think that's a good idea too, Jason.
Okay. All right. So what I will aim to do in advance of our next meeting is circulate my report, absent whatever Kathy's going to want to add on MSBA. And then Kathy, you can either add it into the slides or we can add it after the fact, after this committee, I guess, votes and agrees with it. And then Katura, what I would suggest maybe you could do is you can certainly mark up, add, wherever you want outside the meeting, and then just bring that back to the meeting for discussion. I think would probably
Okay.
be the best way to do it.
Mhm.
Jason, my only question really is around, is there a single place where we're keeping all of the documents where, again, in preparation for the meeting on the 9th, people can go and review? I think that might be a good next step as well.
This is where the joys of the town being on Microsoft and the schools being on Google, right, come into play.
We'd be happy to host any of the reports on the website. I just think having a single place, whether they're the school research or school committee reports, one place would be helpful.
And then Greg, could it be one link to the town website that has all of or whatever the place is where it has all of our meetings, so that then people can just go, so that's just like one thing. We don't have to link every meeting necessarily.
Yep.
I love the idea. I'm open to any thoughts. I could also talk to the town's IT director and just see. I do have access to the capital planning website, on which there's obviously a sub website on the town that we can pull all the final documents into, and then could link it to the school committee. That's probably the easiest way to get our videos, because those are obviously housed on the town side right now. Let me take that offline and figure out what's the easiest way to do it. My only hesitation, Greg, on the Google piece is I know it became hard for us to upload in as committee members. But obviously if you or someone on your team has the ability to manage that, I'm just also trying to be cognizant of all your time. So
no, you and I can connect and identify a path forward.
Okay. I really like the idea, though. Just thinking about the various final versions we've all had of the documents. And then Katura, for you and Kathy, Cheryl did send me yesterday the final documents that came out of our last meeting, so I will forward those to everyone. I just didn't have a chance to forward those. So that reflected the RLS change, the infamous 76 births.
Great. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, I'm just going to give you one more data point that will get updated again in the end of the month. Is I did check with Jim Haggerty last week, and as of December 1st, there was 101 births for Southborough in 2021. So the data, like, just assume the child's delivered in Worcester or Newton or Boston are the most common he sees. It's delayed by their town clerks up to 2 to 3 weeks of him getting the data. So the last birth he saw in Southborough was on December 1st, and we were already at 101. So it does differ a little bit from the RLS study, but I think, as we know, right, every year looks to be a different year, and there's no real pattern to it. But that's just a hard data point that we have at this point. So the number obviously can only go higher for the month of December, but that's just, he's going to keep us updated and has been kind of watching in the background, I think, as well, some of the data we've been using.
What's in the report?
I knew you were going to ask that.
I'm just looking right now.
88.
Ooh,
Yeah, wow.
okay. And it's
So this
already
goes to-
101 without December being in there.
Yeah.
I think I'll just comment too that over the past, the month of December, I did work with Bob. He's also willing to annually update as we get new data, more accurate data. So I think, which makes a lot of sense as we move forward, just in general with RLS.
I do too.
That might be nice, especially in the the next couple of years, you know, when it's sort of planning stages and everything, just to be as accurate as possible.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, this is a side note too, but I noticed that for our school committee meetings, we're still looking at NESDEC numbers. I wonder if, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
Now have
I think it's a good, something we can discuss when we talk about the NASDAQ report on Wednesday.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see any members of the public here. So let's talk about scheduling for next week. So Katura said she was flexible. I thought I heard for anything but Wednesday.
Yeah. And Monday is a holiday. So.
Right. We can't do that.
Yeah.
Even if we wanted to. So Kathy's next Tuesday too soon?
Let me just look real quick.
And obviously this is pending Greg or Keith's availability as well, but I want to go around your schedule, Kathy, given that you're going to be the main presenter there.
I've got a busy Tuesday. How about Thursday?
That works for me.
Yep.
Thursday's fairly busy.
Friday works too. Friday
I was
works.
gonna request Friday works well, and 8 o'clock would be ideal.
Katura?
I cannot do 8. I'm sorry.
How about 10 o'clock?
I can do 10.
Okay.
New 10. I have a hard stop at 11:30, but I don't think we'll need an hour and a half, Kathy, unless.
Nope.
Okay.
You know I can
All
talk.
right.
That'll work for me too.
Okay, good.
All right. 10 a.m. on the 21st.
Great.
All right. Any other business? All right, we're getting there. I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Cook,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. Have a good day, everyone.